Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are glad you are here, and just by showing up, you are already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I am pleased to present an old friend and a new one, and both happen to be about the nicest, most positive people you will ever get to meet yourselves. I promise you will leave today thinking, wow, who knew? And you'll also leave smarter and more inspired than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and please make some new ones. And also ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those as possible during the session. Also, please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the host and speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors, for without their support, we could not keep this series free. Special thanks to First Horizon Bank, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, MedJet, Tennessee Brew Works, Project Music, and Better Than Booze. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome back my good friend, fashion maven, and music PR rock star, Dmitri Vietze. Dmitri is CEO and founder of Rock, Paper, Scissors, the music tech PR firm that represents Reservoir, BandLab, Endel, Master Tour, Moses, and Tuned Global, among many others. He also hosts the Music Tectonics podcast and founded the Music Tectonics Conference in 2019, held annually in Los Angeles. Born in Nashville, Dmitri moved to New York City as a teen, where he studied music at the Fame High School. I can't wait to hear more about that, for music and the arts. After earning his business degree, he leaned into his entrepreneurial bent and launched RPS in 1999. His vision combines cutting-edge technology and deep organic storytelling to help clients crystallize their missions in compelling ways and amplify them in innovative ways. He can also be found speaking at conferences on new approaches to publicity and innovation. By the way, the Music Tectonics Conference will be held October 24 through 26 in 3 stunning beachside venues in Santa Monica, California, and will feature presentations and conversations on the cutting edge of music and tech and innovation. Dmitri, it is always a pleasure to be with you, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say today. Welcome back, brother.
Hey, thank you so much, Tom. Appreciate the intro and for having us here.
And joining Dmitri today as our featured guest is Angela Abbott. Angela has over 7 years of experience in business affairs and in music licensing roles. She is currently at Tidal, where she is fostering new relationships with major labels, publishers, and PROs internationally, while developing internal strategy and process as Tidal embarks on an artist-first approach to the music streaming space. She is the sole point of contact for creator concepts coming out of Nashville and is eager to get deeply embedded with the creative community. Prior to Tidal, she was on the music licensing team at Pandora and SiriusXM, where she successfully negotiated and managed over $200 million in digital partnerships, including deals with Warner Music Group and Empire. She worked with all departments cross-functionally in order to maximize relationships and drive new product corporate initiatives in line with goals of licensors. Angela also took on a new role of negotiating and managing publishing and PRO deals, which gave her key insights into guiding internal creative and product teams to think about how to clear creative content and marketing concepts involving music. As the method of giving back to the music industry community, she also plays a vital role in global partnerships and development co-chair for Women in Music. It is my pleasure to welcome these 2 rock stars to our platform today. Please take it away, guys.
Hey, thanks, Tom. Hey, Angela, we're here on Zoom.
Hey.
We're having a party on Zoom, everybody. Welcome, everyone. Great to have you here. And Angela, thanks for taking the time to hang out and chat with an audience.
You know, this is my favorite thing to do anyway, right?
Yes, we love doing it. Yes, so much. All right, I got a few questions for you. You ready?
I'm ready. Bring it on.
So I've heard a little bit of this story, but I want to hear the whole story. How did you get into the music industry, Angela?
Good question. So, I mean, basically, I was kind of raised in the music industry. I just didn't realize that you could get a job in the music industry. My parents met each other when I was 2 years old in San Diego. My dad was opening up what used to be called Tower Posters, which later became Tower Records, because they used to just sell a few records in the back. So it wasn't always just a
I
pure
didn't know that.
play record store. Yeah, it was like posters and paraphernalia and all kinds of gadgets. So, yeah, they met there. And look, honestly, my dad's from Sacramento, and that's where Tower is headquartered. And so they had him come back, and he opened up all the stores up and down California. He went and got his IT degree, and then he became the VP of Information Systems there, which today, I guess, is still a thing, but back then it was like point of sale retail systems with big server rooms and, before the internet. So, I didn't really realize you could, I would think I was too close to it to realize that, like, oh, I'll go get a degree and then go follow in his footsteps. It wasn't like that. It was kind of a longer transition for me. I did lots of other things before, but ultimately I got a recruiter call from Pandora to join their recruiting team, actually. And then I ended up hiring their music licensing team from 2 to 13. And so I kind of, I've always taken a fascination for learning the insides of a company. Like, to me, it's more than recruiting. It's like, what's the business model? Why do you need someone that looks like that on paper? Why can't you go with someone like this? And so I think through just a series of, being inquisitive and like learning, and then a passion for music, I kind of ended up falling into it.
That's why I like you so much. I'm asking the same kinds of questions. I think it's that curiosity that maybe brought us together, is asking those questions, and as well as sort of like, wow, we can work in music. This is pretty cool. But I want to go back to Tower Records because, I mean, I know, granted, it was your dad. This is not your story, really. But
I did work at Tower, to be fair.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, in Costa Mesa, 94 to like 96. So there's
retail? You were working retail?
There was the Wow store that opened in Long Beach, like on the way to, what's the next beach? Sunset Beach, right over the like bay there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a giant Wow store, and Neil Diamond did the opening.
Oh, well, that's super cool.
Wait, I worked at Costa Mesa.
Gotcha. Yeah. That's cool. I mean, that's a good education in the music industry, is being like right on the front lines when you could actually just see people face to face and talk to customers, and they'd be asking you questions about all kinds of music, I'm sure, and you'd be pushing your favorite stuff, and then the store would want you to push certain things. Yeah.
Well, the release day was like Tuesdays back then, right? And it was CDs, and it was 11 o'clock at night. So it's totally different.
That's so cool. But the poster part, I didn't know. I mean, let's see, I was a teenager in the 80s. And so posters were definitely a thing. In fact, my best friend, I lived in New York City. I lived in Queens for my teenage years. And my best friend had wall-to-wall coverage of Kiss posters and magazine cutouts. Literally, the ceiling. This dude, every single surface was covered with Kiss. But I remember going through in New York City, some of the record stores, they'd have those little folios on the wall that you would like look through posters and stuff. Is that a thing anymore? Do people still do posters?
Maybe like Hot Topic. I don't know. Yeah, but
I mean, like people, like, do people still hang posters? I assume my kids don't have posters. They make art. They like make collages and stuff.
We're too wound up. We won't let them hang stuff on the walls anymore.
Don't touch that. So, all right. So you had this, like recruitment job. That was the first thing, right? You went into recruitment, and then that's how you landed at Pandora, right?
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of an interesting story because my parents wanted to make sure that at an early age, I, wasn't just sitting around at home. So my senior year of high school, like that summer before I went to college, my dad, who was at Tower Corporate. He worked with a technical recruiter, like a recruiting firm to hire his own, contractors. And he was good friends with the managing director there. And she was like, yeah, I mean, do you want to come answer the phones at this recruiting firm for the summer? And I was like, sure. So I started as a receptionist, and this is back, I mean, I know I have like, young looking skin, but this is back in the fax days. So this is back in the days where recruiters would get the Sunday newspaper and highlight, the classifieds basically, or the job openings. And people would and they would put an ad out and people would fax their resumes in. And so I would answer the phones and highlight also like resumes. And because it was tech, it was like, SQL, you're really just matching skills basically. So I worked for a summer there and then went off to college. When I came back, I answered a Craigslist ad. And this woman, her name's Mercedes Chatfield Taylor. She was one of my, mentors, like in my career in general, taught me a lot about negotiation. Her and her husband put an ad out on Craigslist and I met them. I'll never forget, at the Hyatt in Sacramento, downtown across from the Capitol, for a job interview. And she had a retained executive search firm that she had left Korn Ferry and started her own firm. And she was working with the top VCs in San Francisco, Excite, Yahoo, like pre-Google, right? And was basically talking to them about building out their executive staff. So there we were on Sand Hill Road. I was in my early 20s and I was basically doing retained executive search at a young age with her. And yeah, I learned so much. That's where I think I learned about subscription models and kind of understanding that side of the business. And then fast forward, like, I think the recruiter in me, I have a marketing degree. So I always knew, the thing about recruiting is it's good money. So it's hard to break out of it if you're good at it. And Tom can attest to this. There's a lot
I know
of
Tom should be doing this interview probably, right?
There's a lot of not so great recruiters out there, let's just say, but there's a lot of great ones too. And I think like when you're good at it, you just kind of keep going with it. So I guess long story short, I knew I had to map out my career, and in around early 2000s, Google was doing a big hiring for internal recruiting. This is during some of Google's boom. And so I was like, oh, if I go in-house to a company, I'll get to, kind of learn if I want to go into marketing and Google was a great place to learn that because they would also take you into different departments, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, I ended up getting picked up at Pandora. And so it was retained executive search, big, huge staffing agencies where I ran the teams of 10 in San Francisco, like Robert Half, which is a giant firm. And then, Pandora and Google, Pandora, and now here.
Yeah. Well, how did you make the leap from recruitment to labels and licensing at Pandora? Because that's a huge shift.
Well,
I assume.
Actually, it's kind of funny. Like, he's probably not here, but Mike Gubman and I are pretty good friends. And I went up for a role. So once I was at Pandora, I did recruiting for just under a year, and I was like, okay, this is it. This is where I'm going to make my change, because we're doing so much hiring. So I was like, they need good people. I knew the business inside and out already. I knew the CFO is the one I was working with to build the licensing team. I wanted a job in BD. And so I went up for a role in business development under Dave Geary. And I actually lost the job to Mike Gubman. That's where he comes into play. I was number 2 candidate, supposedly. But we had to do a case study. I did a case study on Snapchat. It was this whole thing. But the hiring manager said, I actually think you'd be better suited over here. And so that was on Liz Moody's team in licensing. And at the time, the head of recruiting in HR was like, I really want to go to South by. I got to still work on this team. And she's like, well, we don't really need a recruiter there. And I was like, okay. So I took time off and I went, paid for it on my own. And that's where I got to see kind of the action and kind of understand what value people were bringing in those, in those roles. And so I guess like long story longer, I met Too Short and his team like in the lobby of a hotel.
As you
I
do
went,
at South by.
yeah, and I went to the Pandora House activation, and
Love
Jay
those.
Boogie, who was our hip hop curator, was live on air at the time, and Anderson .Paak was backstage, and it was the first time. I mean, he was like a baby artist back then, and I remember the team being like, "Do you think you could get Too Short here on like live on the radio right now?" And I was like, I think so. And so it was a lot of back and forth with the team, and like, schlepping him down the alleyway, and there was like 40 people with him, but yeah, he ended up going live. And I think at that moment I was like, okay, well, I could do this job, not realizing how hard music licensing actually is. But really the business side has always interested me. That was just like a fun part of it. But yeah, so that's how it happened.
So what was your role when you were dragging Too Short down the alley?
I was a recruiter at the time.
That's so funny. Yeah, they're like, well, you can recruit executives. You can recruit Too Short to come to this booth. That is great. That's awesome. So when you're at Pandora, we'll get to what you're doing now, but what did the role entail? What were your favorite parts of the work?
Well, gosh, when I started at Pandora, I really started in account management because they don't throw you right into the deals, of course. That would be crazy. And my favorite parts, but I learned the licensing part quickly because I think if you can connect, like if you're passionate about music and you can connect to the creative process, you kind of understand what goes into rights and being organized and, payments and operationalizing and all of that. So I think a couple of the things I worked on, Questlove Supreme, which was an original content show that premiered on Pandora prior to it becoming a thing at all. So that was like really interesting and fun. Worked with great people internally on that, and obviously like Questlove, Amir and his team are incredible. And then like the moment in time when Prince's catalog was coming to streaming, I think that was, so normally like the artist marketing team would kind of work on that, but it was real tricky because you had to work with the state on rights, and Rhino was being very sensitive about how they were bringing the catalog in and wanted like a full marketing plan. And at the time, like one of my best buddies in this industry to this day, Marcel, was working kind of on the opposite side of me at Warner. And so he kept pushing me. He's like, you got to come with a plan. And I'm like, well, we're going to get the content no matter what. Like, it's not like they're not going to deliver the content to everyone. But we ended up finding our ad sales team at the time had 4 billboards with a big P on them with different like graphics up and down like Sunset and, south of or west of Sunset. And they were just using them to advertise that they in fact sell ads in the entertainment space. And so I figured out who at Pandora like was, buying those at like basically paying for those billboards. And they were like, oh yeah, it's only like $400 to switch out the vinyl. We could make them all purple. And at the time it was like, what? Okay. So yeah, so we did a whole, I personally worked with all the internal teams to put together a marketing campaign to deliver to the label, to get the estate to sign off on the rights and deliver the catalog. And so that was really fun because I'm a big,
so cool.
Yeah.
That's given me entrepreneur vibes, which is so interesting to hear. I mean, first of all, like when I see, no offense, Angela, when I see your title, I'm like, I don't know what that is. I don't know. That doesn't sound fun. But when you talk about it, I'm like, wait, this is artist relations. These are like marketing campaigns. I didn't know that until you told that story,
I mean, I do think it's like, look, at the end of the day, it's strategic because negotiating the deals with the majors puts you in a position to see a lot of what happens inside of a label, even though I might not have the fun day-to-day, like, dial up the streaming team or the digital marketing team at the label. Like I leave that to my very, very, very capable and successful, counterparts. But I am a creative in my mind and I do have a marketing degree. So, and I know what gets people excited, I think. So when you can take the business sense and see the big picture, just something I've always related in the recruiting career, and then start to get in, like, if people aren't going to do it, I'm just going to do it. So I think it's just a little bit of the scrappy, like hustler stuff too.
Yeah, that's super cool. All right, so you were at Pandora for a decade. I'm curious what observations you made about Pandora from those early days through the pandemic. I'm just curious, like you have this period that you can now reflect back on.
Yeah.
What were your takeaway that you can share with us today?
Yeah, I mean, what an exciting time I worked at Pandora. I didn't realize it at the time, but like that transition of going from, statutory licenses and kind of lean back radio and really kind of being the pioneers with the music genome and all of that, like, which obviously is still intact and still like their big differentiator, I think. But watching the transition of them being early on like programmatic audio, like like ad networks, and like how slick they were with monetization and tech behind that was like, I think pretty amazing to watch. And even though that wasn't directly related to what I did, that's what kept and keeps the company afloat, I think. So I think that was interesting to watch that transition. And then also, I mean, just straight up pivoting to producing live streams during the pandemic. Pandora always had these amazing fan first concerts that were free. And that was like a big, like, how are they going to pivot that? But like the brand stuck with the sales team and, provide, like, kept buying ads. And so we pivoted to, creating a whole playbook of licensing and clearance strategy for live streams that hadn't existed before. So yeah, got to
That's
handle
cool.
all that. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other observations or takeaways from that period?
I mean, there's lots, but I probably shouldn't share. It was stressful. It was stressful. I mean, we went through a couple CEOs, a lot of, scrutiny, I think, with MAU decline, but I mean, still stand by the product. It's a good company. So, but you're asking me all the questions. So let's hold on a second. Let's transition. Well, I mean, you have such a skill for artful conversation, right? Like the groups you bring together with music tectonics, seismic activities, cosmologist roundtable. I just love how you put them together. I feel like it's very unique and there's, you're just really good at it. So was there always a natural skill for that? Did you have to work at it? Like what made you chase that?
It's interesting. It definitely wasn't like a conscious thing. And thanks for the compliment, by the way, Angela. It is something I really enjoy. Like I enjoy what we're doing today. You know that. But like I actually, so Tom mentioned in my bio that I went to the Fame High School in New York City. It's a music and arts high school. And by the time I got there, I'd already been playing music for several years, growing up taking musical instrument lessons. And but it was all classical. And I was sort of like, nothing wrong with classical, but I'm kind of tired of it. And so I started improvising and jamming with friends in the streets and the parks, busked on the streets of New York. Maybe might have been a little late to some of those classes, making a little money with a violinist friend of mine.
Of
Um,
course.
but really what happened was like it was a like consciously diversified school. They brought people from all 5 boroughs of New York City. You had to audition, but they really were like very conscious about that part. It was actually the best thing about the school. It felt like the entire world was right there, and you really got a sense of what was really happening in New York City in the 80s at that moment, which was
Wow.
a pretty exciting time for me. I had just moved from Nashville. You live in Nashville. I was born in Nashville.
Crazy.
But
Yeah.
the Nashville that I knew is a totally different Nashville, and I was a kid that just hung out in the alleys. But by the time I got to New York, I was just like open to everything, and it was just so stark. The separations, even though it was so diverse, you could see which kids hung out here and which kids hung out there and so forth. So I started putting a lot of my extracurricular effort into activism. So I was heavily involved with anti-racism and anti-apartheid in South Africa and social justice things in New York City. And so I always say, like, I'm an entrepreneur, but all the business skills I have is from organizing in the streets of New York City. Like
Wow.
we were doing workshops with elementary school kids. We did an exchange program with a high school that was across the street with us that was considered the Black high school. We were considered the white high school, even though it was extremely diverse, but just that was just the perception. And so we did an exchange program across the street. It was
Wow.
really different. It was wild to see. But the point being, like, I spent a lot of time building community when I was a kid, when I was a teenager. And so a lot of what I feel I bring to these conversations now was just an interest. It was that curiosity we were talking about earlier, just like, wait, tell me more. I don't just accept things as they are. I want to understand, and I want to know from people. I don't want to just know from books. I actually wasn't that big of a reader. I'm more, I'm just more of a people person. So
Yeah.
a lot of it came from there. And then, so that was like high school. And then like, well, I'll skip college for the moment.
Well, before
But
you move on, we do have
yeah.
a question that I think is
Oh,
interesting, and like we want to hear about the audition. What piece did you do?
I don't remember, man.
All right.
That's
Well,
how I do it. I was a flute player. My primary instrument was flute. So I'll tell you that it was that. It was probably classical. I don't remember. I mean, I was like, I would do these like extracurricular music things even before I got to high school, and I was getting like little awards and medals and things for playing classical music. And I just was so not into it at that point. So I tried to get into jazz a little bit. The jazz instructor at the time was kind of rigid, and I was like, wait, that's not what jazz is supposed to be. It's like, well,
right.
we do these competitions, and there's no place for a flute player, so I don't really have here. You can pick up a sax, so I picked up a sax, but I took his jazz improv class like 4 times. I was really, I got really good at that too, but there was no formal place for it. So that's why I kind of like playing music in the streets was fun, and then activism in the streets as well.
That's awesome.
It was fun.
Well,
I had so much fun.
you were gonna keep going though, but then you said you were
Oh,
gonna skip college, but
so the other piece of this is and I know probably some people who come to these events are early career folks who are like wondering, how do you break in or how do you develop your career and things like that. Is in my 20s, I got a first job out of school. It was an unrelated field, but I had this early 20s moment where I realized that adults were just faking it. Like they were just making it up. And like that was kind of like I already had this kind of like music, juggling, activism kind of personality, like vibe. And then when I realized, well, you basically apply the same playfulness to everything else you do and make stuff up. Like the improv actually came up in different ways, like metaphorically. Yeah, we're all, as Shaylee says, we're all faking it. Um, so I realize like most people don't realize that because they have their own blinders. Some of it is like, what did your parents tell you? What did you learn? What does society say? And so forth. But everybody's got their own blinders. And I just at a really early age was like, I am not going to limit myself to what other people think I can do. And again, it's just in this this way that was really always engaged with other people in conversation. So that was a little bit of why I feel I have this approach to these public conversations and so forth. It's all those things coming together. But then, I also do this podcast, the Music Tectonics podcast, which is basically an excuse to talk to anyone I want about music innovation. So again, it's pulling the threads of that curiosity. So once a week-ish, and now our chief strategy officer now helps as well. Sometimes we have some other folks involved with the podcast and as hosts. We have lots of people involved with actually making it happen. But so I've done hundreds of interviews as well, like audio only interviews as well. So that's a lot of practice talking with people.
yeah.
And then I guess I'll wrap up the thing with it's kind of related too, because I have this Music Tectonics conference that we started too, and that also became like a good fit between my personality and getting business done. It was just so much fun to end up meeting people in person and then having these kinds of conversations. So regardless of whether and of course, the more you go to conferences, the more you're like, wait, I think I should be on stage. Like I'm not just an audience person. I'm a stage person. So even though I don't perform music, I do like to be on stage a little bit, and I really like to bring people together and around ideas. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
Yeah, no, you did. But I mean, let's dig into Music Tectonics a little further. Like, why did you start Music Tectonics?
Okay, well, so I mean, to be very like blunt and transparent, conferences have like I realized after a few years in business running my PR company, Rock Paper Scissors, that conferences became our biggest lead source. First of all, I just moved from Bloomington, Indiana, which is an awesome place. We have an awesome team in Bloomington. There aren't that many music companies there. There's a few secretly Canadians right across the street from us,
Wow.
in Bloomington from our main office there. But there aren't a lot of other leads for a PR company in a small college town in Indiana. So going to those conferences became sort of like a necessary thing. I had to go out there to find people and build my network. I mean, I started even before I did that. I started with I've got a street view right here, and my father-in-law is walking by on the street waving at me. I don't know how to tell. I told him yesterday, I was like, stop by anytime. And I'm like, hey, I'm doing something right now,
Not right
buddy.
now.
So I started, actually, I would go to New York, which, where I spent my teenage years. I'd go back there and just like knock on record label doors and things like that. But I realized conferences were like this epicenter of so many people. So, and I've always kind of liked building community as a marketing tool for ourselves as a business as well. So it's kind of a win-win for us to start our own conference. And I wanted to create one that was specifically for music tech, since we've been focusing more and more on that. And now we've chosen that as our entire path. We do PR for tons of different types of music technology and music innovation companies. And there wasn't really anything like it happening on the West Coast. So it just seemed like there was an opportunity for all those things. Like we go to first, it's like you go to conferences, you meet people, get business done, then you're like, oh, I'm going to go on stage, I'm going to do meetups at other people's conferences. Then you're like, maybe we should do our own conference, and nobody else is really doing much on the West Coast. And so there's that. And then I wanted to like try out some new things. None of the conferences quite focused on innovation in the way that I see it. And so we wanted to, like, there's a lot of great conferences. Love Music Biz, love South by Southwest, really enjoyed going to meet them. Music Ally runs conferences. There's a lot of great conferences, but a lot of them have either a specific bent, or some of them are even Indie Week, A2IM. They're a trade group and they have a specific bent. We wanted to approach it from more like this innovation mindset. And so one of the things we started doing was coming up with creative settings as well. Like if you're in a creative space, your mind can kind of go places, I think. So sometimes it's not exactly who's on stage or what the topic is, but it's like where you are. So we try to, like, we rent a carousel on the Santa Monica Pier. So it's literally like an indoor outdoor venue, very playful space for networking and demos and things like that. And really being able to emphasize as much what happens outside of the sessions as inside the sessions. So in a way, it was like I wanted to build a conference that I wanted to go to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty much it.
I think that's important though. And I think like the direction of where the industry is going, like we could look at it over one giant span of 20 years and say, well, it's always kind of innovating, but it's like a very slow innovation. But I feel like things are speeding up now. So like where you sit is like more important than ever. But we skipped over the big move. So
Yes.
how did that go? You drove across the country to Oregon, or
Yeah.
tell us how the road trip was.
Yeah. We drove across. I've got a dog. Some folks from my team are on the Zoom today. Toast is loved in Indiana because I used to bring her to the office all the time. And so we had to drive across the country. I don't know if we would have, honestly. But it was awesome. I mean, I knew this already, but it's been a while since I've done that drive or done a drive of that magnitude. We live in such a beautiful country. It's crazy. Like we were what's the word? We were sort of anticipating that Kansas would be boring and take forever. And honestly, I did not have that experience. It was different than what came next, because what came next was Colorado and Utah and Idaho, which are stunning, and then Oregon. But Kansas wasn't even that bad. And honestly, one of the best places we stopped is called Monument Rocks. It's this weird rock formation in the middle of like cow fields, cow pastures in Kansas. Literally, there's cows crossing the gravel road as you get there. Like you have to stop and get them to move out of the way. And then there's just this stunning thing, and you're just like, this country is absolutely magnificent. And we made time. We stopped in Boulder. My kid Ezra's 14, and they love to climb, so we actually got them a guide to do some outdoor climbing, which they're getting into. The dog Toast, she did pretty well on the trip. I put her in a harness for the first time in the car. Usually we just let her be, and I was like, this is crazy. We're gonna be in the car for. She was so pissed. I've never seen her look so pissed when I put that harness on her and clipped her into the seat belts. So I will say, it was like 103 degrees in 3 of the 4 states we passed through. So it was kind of, July was not the best time to do it. But as you keep going, you see each area has its own magnificence. And it was such a great gateway to Portland. Like Portland has that same vibe, but going through these huge rock kind of cliffs and canyons that you have to, and going over mountains and passes through these different states and seeing waterfalls. We got to go in Idaho. We got to see the Snake River and the canyon where Evel Knievel had his big fail.
Whoa.
It's gorgeous there. It's really
Yeah.
beautiful. And we saw one, there's a 600-foot bridge there, and we saw one, I think it's called a paraglider or something. I don't know. It's some kind of parachuting they do off this bridge. It's one of the only bridges where you're allowed to do that, and really
Yeah.
you shouldn't. It's still dangerous. So, but it was
Yeah.
kind of, like I said, it was a good gateway to Portland, because like now, like where I'm sitting right now in Portland, on my way to work, I walk about 15 minutes. On the left, I see a volcano, and straight ahead, I see a mountain, and on the right, I see a waterfall. So it's really, yeah, I mean, it's been amazing. So, but Angela, hold on, I was going somewhere. Let me see if I can get the steering wheel back.
We did opposite journeys though, because I did the lower two
drive.
July ago from Northern California. We went to Tahoe for 4th of July and then drove across like New Mexico, and
that stuff's beautiful too. I did that when I was a kid.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, no, it's true. Like we had to put the balance back,
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
continental balance or something. So let me ask you, when we broaden out from Pandora to the music industry, I'm curious, is there anything else you noticed in your first decade in the music industry? Did we cover all that already?
I mean, maybe a little bit. I mean, I do think it's kind of interesting right now because I feel like there is a little bit of, not negativity, that's the wrong word, but like skepticism around streaming. And I think like, obviously it's a very low margin business. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. But when you think about it, it's like, it's easy to kind of, put a business under such scrutiny, but not think about the big picture of like, this giant transition we've made from, vinyl to, from physical to digital. So, I think like that's kind of what I've noticed, as, again, just especially being a little girl, with someone who was deeply entrenched in the physical space, like even like all of his little golf trophies from the music business, and like seeing, EMI and Columbia, like different record labels that are now like part of one major. He's got all this, random label paraphernalia, and it's kind of interesting to see that transition. Then I think, getting more current, there's a ton of, shifts happening. So, I mean, it's gone really from thinking about like the artist and the content to the people who consume the music and, fans and monetization of that angle. So just a lot of transition.
Yeah. And like you said, it's happening faster and faster too. It's almost impossible to keep up with. It's like you used to be able to sort of know, like you could, like working in the industry, you could be like, what's coming next. Like you can see it coming. And right now it's starting to feel like it's coming from all directions. And that's the thing about like music tech now. It's not, music tech used to be like you said, your dad was in IT. He dealt with servers and racks and point of sale. That was the tech. Didn't feel innovative. Nobody was like, oh shit, you could scan these now. No, nobody was like, oh, you're printing receipts that quickly. Nobody gave a shit. In music, nobody cared, right? But it was it was all that, it was like digital inventory was probably really important to the supply chain, But now it feels like every 5 seconds, it's like, we lived through the NFT moment.
Wow.
and the metaverse moment, and none of it's necessarily gone. And the live streaming moment too, like there was all these things where it's like, this is the new thing, and now it feels like it's all like it's constant. I
mean, sometimes I feel like people are exhausted though, like in terms of there is this big potential transformation, but it does take a long time. So I always use this analogy, and it's dumb, but like, the sprint versus marathon, you can use that in so many ways. And it's very cliche, but like it translates to everything from like an artist release strategy schedule, like they're like, yeah, but what about this release and that release? And, I got to make sure I have I get this playlisting and this marketing pitch. And it's like, well, yeah, but like, do you want to make it as an artist? Like, what is your trajectory, And I think it's kind of very similar to the streaming space or music tech and innovation in general. It's like, do you want to come out with an idea and like force everyone to get on board quickly and, and not make it? Or do you want to like actually solve challenging problems, like, metadata hygiene and, global rights management operationalization and the unsexy stuff? Like, it's just kind of, it's interesting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Some of those B2B concerns really make a huge difference in the long run and in the big picture for even how fans and listeners experience music. But nobody else wants to talk about it, but people like us. You know what I mean?
That's why we're still here on this call.
That's why these folks are still on the call, I hope. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, huh. Yeah, interesting. Well, I think we could keep going deep, but I'm curious, your timing when you moved over to Tidal, it's like February of last year. It's been a little bit now. As you mentioned, you moved from Oakland to Nashville. Pandora, you mentioned, was this early mover. You had an exciting time there in terms of music streaming. And then Spotify really took off. And we hear about Apple Music and YouTube and Amazon having these like real growth spurts in the space. And it seems like in some ways Tidal is kind of still making itself known in that mainstream kind of way. It certainly early on had a big splash with a lot of artist involvement and so forth.
Yeah.
But what are some things that you like to tell newcomers about Tidal? Things they should understand about that as a service?
I mean, I think to begin with, not everyone knows. I mean, it may seem obvious, but not everyone knows that Tidal was acquired by Block, which is the corporate entity that owns like Square and Cash App. So Tidal, being part of that vision, between like a Jack Dorsey and Jesse, who's our CEO, who, was an Apple hardware guy. Like, it doesn't always make sense to people on paper. But I think there is, I've never worked for tech leaders that are, 20-year out, 10-year out, like visionaries. And so I think it will all make sense, and I think, so I would start there. And I would also say, like, obviously we're going to continue to push, that we are a service for the artist. And I think that's not to say that other services aren't, they very, very well may be. And, I had great experiences at Pandora in terms of them being very artist, friendly. But I think it's just different. Like, when you come to Tidal, the things that we're talking about in meetings is how to actually make their careers easier and more stable. And so I think there's a lot of, different innovative ideas that come from all of that. We would love to continue to have this pool of high-end audio files, and, we can continue to debate a high-end audio quality like all day and all the different formats. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, that's no longer a unique feature, given that these other big tech companies have come in and, and the fact that labels will, if pressured, kind of give everyone the same terms. And I think, becomes you do have to differentiate in different ways. And so I would say, like, it's going to make sense, I think, what Tidal is, really focused on. But the main thing is the focus around helping artists solve their challenging problems is different. I think other services are thinking about the user, the subscriber, like how to solve their listening problems.
So just to be clear, that's not just an Angela thing, that's a Tidal thing?
Yeah.
That's so cool. Because whenever I talk to you, I'm like, man, she's so artist focused, and she has so many cool ways that she's like helping musical creators like do stuff and shine a light on them and things like that. But I guess right now is what I'm realizing, it's a great fit for you, because that sounds very Angela to me. But I'm seeing that's really larger than just you. It's the brand.
And I think other services, or other, just call it companies in the music tech space, even doesn't have to be a service. They're so focused on UGC, and, I think that's important and there's a place for it. But what about all the really phenomenal producers and composers and sound engineers and, writers, like where's the space for them to thrive and have careers? So I don't know. I look at titles like we have the deepest credits on the platform. I think, the way that we celebrate music on the platform is unique. So yeah, so
That's cool. Well, so let's talk a little bit more about you. What are some of your favorite things about working there at Tidal?
I think that like probably one of my favorite things is they have a culture, like the work culture. It's okay to lead and it's okay to push back. And I think like that makes it very autonomous. I'm so used to kind of more structured, traditional like corporate structures where it's like, well, you can't disagree with this person or you can't disagree with that person, or maybe you shouldn't vocalize that opinion because it's not really aligned with what like the goal is, of the person who's running the meeting. But
yeah,
I think here it's like, if you have a good idea, you should, if you don't say it, you're going to get in trouble. You know what I mean? Like, don't go have that conversation behind a closed door. And then someone's like, why didn't you say that in the meeting? Like that was really valuable and everybody should have heard that. So I think
that's cool.
the work culture is, something I love. I also love maybe this is just unique to Tidal, but like, I love living in Nashville and kind of being the only Tidal person here because it's like that, like other, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Pandora, Sirius, they all have teams here. And while I do wish we had a team here, it is kind of nice as I'm getting up to speed and other people are familiarizing themselves with Tidal, to be the person that I get the ear to the ground stuff, because people are like, oh, I didn't realize there was a Tidal person here. Like, let me learn more. So I'd say like those are, and I think it has a strong like lifestyle brand tie-in. It's like kind of mysterious still, and I like that.
I'm still interested in what Nashville's like now, because like when I grew up there, it was like it was in the 70s, and as a kid, I basically knew the alleys I played with. And so when I go back for like Music Biz or to go to Project Music, the incubator there, I'm sort of like, I don't even recognize it, honestly. And also, like as a kid, I didn't drive a car yet when I left. So I didn't like go around to different parts of town. I lived on Belmont Boulevard, which is like a very like desired location. But at the time, our house would get broken into all the time. It was kind of I found a gun next door in the neighbor's yard after there was like these attacks and people. So it was a totally different place. But so how are you liking Nashville and what's it like now?
I like it. It is kind of interesting, like your point about not having a car. Like we moved here and because we were coming from the Bay, we only had one car and we still only have one car. And now my husband's like started taking on projects. And so he takes the car, takes Cadence to school, goes and does, project work. And then I'm here by myself with no car. So, like, I guess my point is I haven't explored as much as I would like to. And I think it's like the blessing and the curse of like, we moved here because we were all on top of each other during the pandemic. I wanted to be close to the creative community, do more in music. So there were like a variety of reasons, but I'm building my own little sanctuary here, so I don't have to go very far. So my thing is like, I invite a lot of the local creative community to my house, and have meetings here, or I'll have cookouts in the backyard. But I think like, what is it like if I had to like, I think the restaurant scene's really interesting. Like, you're either spending $400 out at dinner because the tourist prices and like,
Wow.
food and beverage here is like crazy. Or you're eating, really good, shitty food, like fried food. You know what I mean? So it's like, I have to cook a lot too, so I can stay healthy.
Yeah.
So I'm here a lot, but I think seeing the reason I moved here in the creative community and recognizing like the fact that yes, it's a big country population, but it's a very big non-country population. A lot of the music that started in this area was pre-country, like when you think about the Fisk Jubilee Singers and, there are some incredible musicians here in hip hop, R&B, pop. And so like, that's what I get energized by is like, I want to see the next wave of talent come out of here. And people be like, oh wow, they're from from Nashville, you know? So
Yeah,
yeah,
super
I love
cool. Huh.
it.
Yeah,
Inspired.
it's interesting, and again, this rings as such a great conversation for Tom Truitt to be kind of hosting, because you still sound a little bit like a recruiter, Angela. When you talk about your own job, you sound like you're recruiting. You're like I know I'm the only one here, but I love being the ambassador for title here in Nashville, and it
Yeah.
gives me a chance to really like it's really this interesting fit between not just the company but what your specific situation is. So it's fun to hear about why you enjoy
It's,
working there.
it's all intentional. Like, I
Mm,
mean, not to get all woo woo, but like I am giant on setting intentions and, goals and, mapping things out and like not to perfection, right? Like I love to be spontaneous and all of that too, but you want to be able to see something and go after it. So it is all intentional.
yeah, I like that. That's very cool.
Um, what about you though? Like, what are some of your favorite things about running a music tech PR firm?
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I love what I do. Like it's funny, like as a lot of with a lot of entrepreneurs, you're like, well, do you have any hobbies? It's like, well, my business is my hobby. Like I enjoy it so much. I wouldn't be doing it if I did just love so many aspects of it. But like I guess if I think about like what are the specific things that I enjoy, I really like helping founders. The folks that we end up getting hired by a lot of times are the founders. Maybe they're CEOs as well, but they're usually like very mission based around their innovation. So it's really fun to be in that kind of helpful role. But as a result of like, we typically will have about 24 clients at a time. So we get to see a lot of different types of innovation in music. It could be on the live side, it could be on the distribution and licensing stuff, it could be Web3 stuff, AI, live stream, and a lot of like music creation tools, which feel like they're opening up access to more people being able to make recordings and get the recordings out there. Um, Not to undermine anything you said about the UGC stuff, but there's a lot of like creativity happening by more people. They won't all reach kind of like, Billboard charting status. They won't
Yeah.
necessarily all um, produce music that people are going to want to listen to over and over again, but they're experiencing it. So it's less about how are we helping a specific artist, more about how is creativity getting unlocked through music. So we get to see all these different aspects of the way that innovation minded folks are adding new things to music. And that's how I got into music, was like I really got interested in how different sounds are made and beating on different types of materials, and even building some instruments, and testing things out and exploring music from all over the world that makes interesting sounds. And to me, it's not what people are doing in music innovation is not really different. It's humans fucking around with sound waves. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
and and then there's the commerce side. There's the commerce, which to me is not purely an evil thing that's takes away from art and creativity, but it actually enables it in a lot of ways. If people can figure out ways to spend more time making music because they're monetizing it and so forth, especially if they can keep their soul in terms of what creative they bring. So it feels like we're having a larger impact, wider than if we were working with a single artist or a single company, because we're seeing all this innovation stuff that's happening. And then I have to say, like, another favorite thing is I really love building this epic supportive team. Like like out there in the world, people see this outward facing Dmitri, outward facing rock, paper, scissors, and music tectonics. But most of my day-to-day life is with this small group of 17-ish people who are really just, they've got the biggest hearts. They're the hardest workers. They're so caring. They have high standards, and they're always learning, and they're really interested in how they can be creative with telling stories for our brands, or trying out the stuff. We have different mantras we use in the office, or I guess it's not an office now that I'm a remote CEO in the company. And one of them is try the free samples. And it comes from several of our team members are artists themselves, musicians. And they like to try out the stuff our clients have to offer. And it's really fun to see them be able to pull the threads of curiosity for themselves as they're doing PR, and then to see the relationships blossoming among our team, people really supporting each other. It's pretty. It's another favorite part that I actually, until coming on Smartest People, I've not really expressed publicly. So it's kind of fun to think about, like, letting people know, like, I have this amazing team. It's so sweet to see their interactions.
That's awesome. Well, I know we don't have a ton of time, but like I would love to pivot in here. Like, what are some of your passions outside of work?
I mean, for me, it's like work and family. That's pretty much it. So hanging out with my kids whenever I can is pretty awesome. Um, I
Oh
still play.
yeah. And we have to hear about the crazy pants. And then yeah.
Yeah, I mean the crazy pants are basically it's actually a music industry story. There's a performing arts conference called APAP in New York City that I went to a lot when we were doing more artist PR, and I had one pair of kind of they were like wool slack, like dressy, but they were checkered, and I don't know. I didn't think about it at the time. Later, I've seen pictures of myself as a kid in the 70s, and my parents put me in some ugly ass crazy pants, and they look awesome now. But I had just one pair of pants, and a friend of mine who actually, she was the artistic director for Stern Grove Festival in San Francisco, which is an outdoor summer music festival. And she just walked up to me at this conference. It all comes back to conferences. And she's like, "Hey, crazy pants." And I forgot what pants I was wearing. I was wearing pants, but I forgot what pants I was wearing. And I just thought she was like, "Hey, what's up, crazy pants?" I was like, she sees me. She knows who I am. And then I was like, oh shit, she was talking about my pants. But then I was like, but wait a second, it works both ways. And so I started realizing that would be a great, kind of a great signature wardrobe. And I started collecting pants, and people started getting me pants, crazy pants. And now it's almost all I have. Sometimes I'll put on plain pants if I go to the grocery store, just if I want to be in incognito.
Yeah.
That's the story. It just felt like it was me. So,
I love it. That's awesome.
yeah. Man, we only have a couple minutes left. Um, yeah, so I don't know. We didn't really ask you about your anything on the side for you, like your hobbies and stuff. Outside of music, you've got a kid as well. I don't know. What are some of your personal interests and passions?
I mean, kind of the same. For me, it's like work and family. Yeah, I have a husband. I have a daughter. My daughter is going to be 12 this year. She's just started sixth grade. She is my number one prize. And she's funny. She's a songwriter, actually. That was another thing about moving here. She's a creative and thought she'd have more opportunities here. And she has a song out that you can go listen to, but she also
That's so
just
cool.
loves to write. So yeah, so that's a big passion of mine. I think, like, as I already mentioned, like hosting creative community here and learning about the music making process, visiting other people's production studios. I love wine. I love to cook. So like wine is a deep, deep passion of mine. Um, I did some wine influencing back in the day for
Wow.
a Napa winery, and yeah, I love wine. I would like to go get my SOM certification.
Oh,
So
that's
someday
so cool.
that's
Very
that's
cool.
on the goals list.
Yeah. Well, we are running out of time. Maybe we'll have to continue this at Music Tectonics in Santa Monica. You're going to be there. You're speaking there. And if everyone who's here today wants to hear more from people like Angela, that's why I love talking to Angela. She's one of the innovators. We got a growing community of folks in music innovation. Would love for folks to come check out Music Tectonics October 24th to 26th for more of these types of conversations. If you feel like this is your room, that you'll see even more of that over there. We actually have, Tom, is it okay if I make a little plug on the badges here? We have our early bird tickets are good until August 15th. So if you want to come, get tickets in the next 5 days. And if you happen to be a music tech startup, we've just extended the deadline. We always do a music tech startup competition. So that deadline's been extended to August 13th. So jump into the mix. I see some folks in the chat have been. Thanks everybody for coming out and for the positive words. And Angela, thanks for taking the time to share your story and to ask me questions. And Tom, as always, the host with the most. Really appreciate the community that you build here. It's been awesome.
Well, thank you to both of you. And Dmitri, you know I'm the head of the Nashville chapter of the Dmitri fan club. Always have been, always will be. Folks, you got a good dose of why he is so successful today. It's that enthusiasm. He's a giant karma bomb. And Angela, welcome to Nashville. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'm delighted to hear your positive reviews of our city. We've upped our food game a lot in the last few years. To the audience, continue to be nice to each other is the only thing I'm going to tell you. And I look forward to seeing everybody, hopefully at Music Tectonics this fall. If not, hit me up when you're in Music City. And with that, I will say good day, folks.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye.